Hey there, everybody. Welcome to your readings for the week. These are the readings for the week ending September 10th. No, September 17th. Sorry about that. We've already done the readings for September 10th. We're working on September 17th. Mercury is full on in retrograde this week in Libra, causing a little bit of a problem for some. We're going to go ahead and we're going to get right to our readings and see how that plays out for everybody. And we are going to start with Jordan. I believe that Jordan is the first one on my list. Yes, she is. Our Aries. So we're going to kick off this week actually with the moon in Aries, and that's going to cause a little bit of a disturbance in the force. As it starts off in conjunction with Jupiter, which is still retrograde. I think Jupiter's retrograde ends next month. I'm not 100% sure on that. I'll have to check on that. And both planets kick off the week in opposition with Mercury. Now, Jupiter is going to be in opposition of Mercury for a minute. So all this week, and that it will move into next week as well. Oppositions are challenges, and with Jupiter's focus on those you love and Mercury's retrograde focus on those who support you, this kind of creates one of those issues where it just feels like you're putting everything you have into other people, and it doesn't really feel like you're getting any of that back. And to be honest with you, a lot of women go through this. A lot of people go through this. It's kind of a nightmare. And with the moon being a part of it right in the beginning of the week, especially on Sunday when it's in conjunction with Jupiter and part of this opposition, it really sort of, it becomes emotional. It just, it's that classic moment where you can't give anything else, and you're standing there hoping that somebody will be there to support you and help you out because it's just overwhelming for you, and it just feels like you're not going to find it. Unfortunately, it's a really sucky feeling. I hate that feeling. Luckily, it becomes less intense and less emotional as the week progresses. It's still a problem, but it doesn't, the intensity of the problem sort of kind of calms down a little bit, if that makes sense at all. The moon is helpful in some cases, though, on Monday as it moves into a sextile with Saturn. Saturn's focus is really on how you think, and Saturn's retrograde kind of turns that responsibility of your thought process back on you. I mean, the truth is that there's really nobody that's responsible for your thought process but you. It's really your responsibility. This is just kind of a reminder that by changing your perception or changing your thought process a little bit, it does make things less negative for you, if that makes sense. The good news is Jupiter's trine with Mars, which... no, there is no trine with Mars this week. It looked like there was at the beginning of the week, the moon's trine with Mars. Is actually it's a sextile, not a trine. Still a positive aspect, though. It is helpful because when you're looking in the direction of people who should be supporting you, it sort of broadens out your vision to the type of support that you do have. And I do feel that you have a pretty big support system. So if you're, say, looking to your husband to support you and he can't because he's got all kinds of stuff going on and he's really, really busy, rather than getting frustrated with him, maybe broaden out your vision to see that you have a support system in a lot of other people as well. So it kind of creates a difficulty, it creates a challenge, but it's helpful at the same time when you think about it, because a lot of times we get so locked into this one thing that we're focusing on, this one person, and that causes a lot of negative emotion. We get frustrated. Our mind goes in all these different ways that are unhelpful, very negative. And then you start to convince yourself that you have no help at all, you have no support at all. The moon is actually coming in and saying, you absolutely do. You have all kinds of support. You just have to broaden your vision in order to see it. So it is a little bit of a challenge, but what I look at in terms of challenges is how to navigate through the challenge. And there are a lot of challenges, of course, that are impossible to navigate through. We just can't. And that's okay. But most of the time, I'd say 95% of the time, we can navigate through challenges. We just have to choose to navigate through the challenge or to fester in it. And that's really what it comes down to. The other thing that I kind of feel is playing out in this as well. I keep wanting to go back to your daughter, the one that's autistic, and I feel like there may be some difficulties there in terms of her schooling, in terms of her new class, her new classes, new teachers. I just feel that things are not quite as comfortable for you as they could be in this particular setup. So maybe you don't get along with the teacher as well. Maybe she's doing things that you don't necessarily approve of or you're not comfortable with. If you go to the teacher and you can't get a resolution, you go to the principal. You can't get a resolution, you go to her director, because all children with disabilities have like an advocate, and you don't get a resolution, keep going up the line. Go all the way until you hit the superintendent of schools if you have to, in order to get a resolution. The truth of the matter is, in school, period, you do not have to settle with something that you don't like. And even if it takes a lot of work to get there, eventually you find somebody that can kind of help you out with that. And that's also the support that I'm referring to here. However, in my experience with a disabled child, the fight is exhausting. You're young now, so it might be less exhausting. As she gets into high school, it's just going to be like, oh, I'm so sick and tired of doing this. But you have to. Nobody's going to advocate for our kids quite like we were, or we will, I should say. So don't give up just because somebody tells you that it's that's not how we do things. That absolutely does not mean that it can't be changed. If you are uncomfortable with it, you have a right to have it changed. And it's as simple as that. If you're uncomfortable with her being in that class, you have the right to that class to change. Now, that may mean that she changes schools, which can be a pain in the butt, but it's better for her to have what she needs to have than it is for her to be in a classroom where she's not getting the support that she needs also. So if you think about it in those terms, it may be a little bit more work, but it makes more sense in the long run. So that is what I've got for you, Jordan. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to Darcy. So we've got a lot of stuff going on in Taurus this week, including the moon moving into Taurus this week as well. Tuesday, Wednesday-ish, the moon moves into conjunction with Uranus. Now, Uranus is still in a square with Saturn. I have been looking at the astrology for next year because I've already started sending 13 card readings out. And while Uranus is not leaving Taurus next year, Saturn is leaving Aquarius next year. So we are definitely ending this square between the two, which is nice. I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure you're looking forward to it as well. So we do have this square with Saturn. Uranus is very much focused on your daily schedule, and Saturn's focus is on the mind and how you perceive things. And we really, it's interesting to me, because I've worked with a lot of clients who have told me this is, my mind overthinks things. It's just how it is. There's nothing I can do to stop it. That blows my mind because you either have control of your brain or your brain has control of you. And, you know, as the Aquarian control freak that I am, I just can't see handing over control to something else or somebody else or anything like that. So Saturn in Aquarius in the mind is sort of and in retrograde is sort of mirroring that back at you and saying, do you have control of me or do I have control of you? And as the stubborn Taurus that you are, you should be the one that has control over your brain. So it's a challenge, but I feel like challenges have to come up sometimes in order to make us see that we're in charge. And we don't usually see those things when things are going good. Something has to happen in order to bring our focus on it. And it's usually a challenge that does that, right? Nobody grows when things are perfect. They always grow when everything falls apart, kind of a thing. It's just how it is. The good news is that Uranus is in a grand trine with the sun. Venus moves into that grand trine as well later on in the week, and Pluto's focus is on the past. The sun and Venus are focused on career. Uranus in your sign, of course, is focused on your daily schedule. I feel that a couple of different things are coming from this. One, I feel like some ideas from the past or the ways that you've done things in the past are going to be very helpful towards your success career-wise this week. In fact, I know that you work, but I sort of feel like if it's not coming up this week, it's coming up pretty quickly here. Either you're looking at changing jobs for something that makes a little bit more money and stretches you a little bit more, or you're looking at a promotion. And I feel like you're kind of sort of working towards this goal right now. And the good news is that this grand trine is really going to stick around for the next couple of weeks. So it will still continue to be present next week, maybe even into the following week. And this is a very powerful energy that is going to move you towards your career goals. So it's going to be very helpful. Even if Mercury is retrograde this week, Mercury's retrograde is going to join this grand trine. So in a way, you're able to use that retrograde in your favor, which is always nice. Everybody always thinks that Mercury is bad when it goes retrograde. And yes, it does cause a lot of complications. In fact, it kind of feels like we've been in one for the past couple of weeks in terms of phones not working, computers not working right, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a lot of things that are good about Mercury's retrograde as well. And when we're talking about communication, it's helpful for those who tend to over communicate, and over communicating tends to confuse things. People don't wind up getting what they want. So by taking away that over communication, it actually puts you in a position to just put out there what you need to put out there, and that's it. And that is helpful towards reaching those career goals. We also continue to have a grand sextile between Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Again, something that's not going away anytime soon. These three planets don't move very quickly. So this is an aspect that's going to continue to keep helping you over and over again. And it's really pointed towards the home. And so I see some changes there in the home as well, whether it's moving to some place that's a little bit more stable or a little bit more enjoyable, or it's bringing that stability and that enjoyment into the environment that you're in now. So changes that you've been wanting to make, things are going to start to open up a little bit in order for you to make those changes. So a little bit of a challenge, no big deal, because you have so many things that are working towards something that you've been goals that you've been really wanting to meet for a long time here. And it really does feel, Mercury retrograde or not, it feels like things are finally moving forward for you again in all aspects of your life. And that's really something that I'm proud to report to you, actually, because this challenge that's been going on between Uranus and Saturn, especially when planets were in Leo, and of course we are looking to have planets in Scorpio here pretty quick too, we're only a week away at this point from Libra season, which means we're only 5 weeks away from Scorpio season, and that's going to cause some complications as well. So let's just enjoy this break here where things are sort of smoothed out a little bit and working a little bit better in terms of reaching some of these goals. I think that this week and next week really are just very powerful weeks for you to be able to take care of those things. So put as much energy into it as you can, get those things, get those changes, underway, at least started now, so that you can enjoy them sooner rather than later. So that's what I have for you, Darcy. My tongue doesn't work, but that's what I have for you. I'm going to move on to my Leos. I've got Connie here first. The good news is we have no planets at all in Leo this week, which is nice, because we really don't want them, to be honest with you right now. So we'll happily just keep them at bay for now, and enjoy the break there, because we all deserve to have a break from time to time. Well, we do have focuses on long-term goals. We have Ceres currently influencing Leo this week. Ceres is known as the Great Mother. What I find interesting about that for you is a couple of different things. One, I know that we have talked more recently about your mother because we've recently passed the anniversary of her passing, and so of course that kind of stuff comes up, and the challenges and difficulties within that relationship. And I feel like two things really are coming out of this. One, I feel like in some cases taking the time to plan long-term goals can be very difficult when you have a lot of baggage hanging around you, and the baggage has a lot to do with your family, of course. The other thing is that having a maternal influence over your sign can actually really be uncomfortable if you didn't have a comfortable maternal influence to begin with. So I feel like in some cases, especially after all the things that you've been through with your knee surgery, mothering yourself is really an important thing to do at this time. Also, in terms of your long-term goals, when you normally think of a mother figure, you think of security. And because of that, I feel like a lot of your long-term goals are really centered around that security. So financial long-term goals, because that's what creates security, a physical thing that creates security in a non-physical way, I guess is the best way to describe that. I also feel that this has to do also with some of the things that need to be taken care of around your house. I know you've done the roof already and taken care of some of those major repairs, but I feel that there's other repairs that are on your mind also that you're kind of worried about wanting to get taken care of, especially before the bad weather sits in. So there's two things that sort of come out of this. One, we human beings have this tendency to come up with this list in our mind of all of our to-do list of all the things that we need to do, and we keep it in here. And we use the term someday, which really that word should be thrown directly right into the trash, because someday never comes. It just, when we use that term someday, it never happens. So I want to say that first and foremost, it's very important to write down what your goals are. Write down on a pad all the household goals that you have. What do you want to get fixed? The reason I say write it down is because you can check them off. And as you get them done, you check them off. It feels like you're getting something done because you are getting something done. The other thing I feel that it's important to tell you is that while these types of goals in terms of your home goals as well as your financial goals are important, personal goals are always important too. And we've been going through one heck of a healing process over the years. So I feel it's important actually to make some goals around that as well. when you do that, you give yourself something specific to focus on instead of sort of, we talked about that merry-go-round where you kind of get on the merry-go-round and go round and round. That helps to eliminate the merry-go-round, or the emotional merry-go-round, I should say, just a little bit, so that you can focus on really the task at hand and what needs to be done. I kind of feel, I know that, I'm saying last week, but really I'm recording these a week before. So we're talking 2 weeks from when you're actually going to see this, that there were some triggers around your family. I feel that, that these are smoothing out a little bit. It's obviously they're not going to go away entirely, but I don't see them being as prevalent this week as they were last week. In fact, I see more focus on getting your energy back up, getting back into the swing of things, getting more back into working, and less time focused on those triggers, if that makes sense. And it's, work is always a good distraction for that, or it can be a good distraction for that. So that's what I have for you, Connie. And I'm going to move on to Jenny. No planets in Leo. Thank goodness, because the last few weeks were kind of a nightmare. So, well, maybe not last week, but the weeks before that, with all those planets going in there and aspecting all these other fixed sign planets, just, kind of difficult. We don't have that anymore. When you have no planets influencing your sign, it sort of feels like you can almost focus on whatever you want. And this week, your focus really is on your long-term goals. And with Ceres influencing that, Ceres is a dwarf planet known as the Great Mother. So there's a big maternal influence there with this planet. I feel a lot of these goals are structured around your children, being a mother. In some cases, I kind of feel this this sort of panic as your girls are really getting older now, and getting towards the end of being little kids and being in school, and you being responsible for them. And that's kind of wonderful and super depressing and sad at the same time. And so this is a great time actually to set up some goals of what you want to do with these kids before they become adults. Have you taken them to Disneyland yet? Have you taken them to all the places that you wanted to take them before? Now's a good time to get those, to start getting those goals planned. And as well as I do that, a wish without a goal is just never going to happen, right? So by making a goal, by writing it down, by giving yourself steps towards achieving that goal, you set yourself up for actually being able to get that done, to take that trip to Disneyland. So I feel like this is something that's been on your mind a lot. And when you kind of sit there and go, oh my God, my kids are getting so much older. What am I going to do? I still haven't done this. I still haven't done that. You're ignoring the fact that you have plenty of time to plan those things, rather than wallowing in what you have no control over, because they're going to grow up whether you want them to or not. I've tried every old wives' tale on how to stop that. None of them work. This is the better way to deal with that feeling, to set up those goals, to make sure that you do those things with your girls before they become adults. So that is what I have for you, Jenny. And I am moving on to Linda, my good buddy Linda. So we have the Sun and Mercury continuing in your sign this week, and for the last week, as a matter of fact, because Virgo season ends at the end of next week. So you should enjoy your Virgo time while you still have it, because it's almost up. Mercury is also retrograde. Now that retrograde Mercury is in Libra this week, so it will not be in Virgo until next week. That does give you a little bit of a break there. Of course, Mercury is retrograde no matter what, so it doesn't matter, but it does at least take away its influence a little bit, not being in your sign quite yet. Good news and bad news. The sun and Venus are in Virgo currently right now. Focus is on career. With the moon moving into Gemini right at the end of the week, this creates, it turns an opposition with Neptune into a T-square as the moon brings that sort of squared energy in there with all of these planets. The moon's focus is on relationships. Neptune's focus is on the home. Again, oppositions between the home and the career always wind up feeling like you're sort of toggling back and forth between your responsibilities at home and your career. So I feel that one, this has a lot to do with your husband and taking care of your husband. He's maybe taking up a little bit more time than he normally does this week, and that's probably going to move into next week as well, because these oppositions are going to continue through next week. The other thing that I really feel is sort of coming out of this as well is that I've seen your planner. I used your planner as an example in the horoscopes that I just recorded. As a matter of fact, there's so much, you have so much going on. And when you have so much going on career-wise, it's hard to focus on the task at hand. So if your focus is on taking care of your husband, your mind is going to, okay, and then afterwards, I'm going to do this for this project and make sure this is taken care of for this project, and I have to call this person, and you're not really focused on your husband. Alternatively, you're focused on all of these career goals, but in your mind, you're like, does my husband have everything that he needs? Is he okay in there? I don't want to hear him. So it's like your mind is constantly in two places at once. And this is really going to create a challenge because you're just not focused on what you need to be focused on. The more grounding and bubbling you do, the more meditating you do, the easier this is going to be. Because, you know, in all honesty, you have to be able to focus on what you're doing in the moment. And you already have so many career projects going on that it's hard to just focus on one of them as it is. You add this element of home responsibility in there, and it creates an even bigger issue. So just try as much as you can. What I'm being told for you to do, which might not be a bad idea, is as you start each project, do a little mini ground and bubble breathing exercise. Breathe in and out a few times. Just get yourself relaxed and focused. Focus on the task at hand. Move on to the next one. Do the breathing exercises. Do the same thing. That way you're closing what you finished. You're opening what you're starting. You're not necessarily sitting there with your brain in 50 different places. The good news is we have a beautiful grand trine, which will continue for the next couple of weeks with Pluto and Uranus. And Uranus is very much focused on that schedule. Uranus is also retrograde, and Uranus is all about doing things completely different. It's out of the box ideas. It's Aquarius's planet. You know, all Aquarians are sort of weird anyways. We go against what everybody else is doing, or at least we're known for doing that. When Uranus is retrograde, it sort of takes you back to the way things have always been done, the way that works for you. And that's why your paper planner is what I use that example for, actually. I feel like in this little bit of chaos with the challenges, you may have some rescheduling that needs to be done. And of course, with the paper planner, that means a lot of whiteout or a lot of scratches or a lot of erases to move things around, which can be a little bit difficult. However, I also feel that in rescheduling some of those things, you may just have some extra time for yourself pop up in there. And while it is very easy to fill that time with more work, I think it's really, really important that you make sure that some of that time is taken up for you, whether it's relaxing, whether it's meditating, whether it's actually sitting down and enjoying a meal instead of scarfing it down, whatever it takes. I feel like because you have all this stuff going on, that self-care is even more important. And because you don't have a lot of time for it, you got to make time wherever you can. So it's really easy to want to just go right to work, but let's maybe put some self-care in there as well if you can. So that's what I have for you. I'm going to move on to Teresa Demarco, my Libra. We currently have Mercury retrograde in Libra, and this week, all of this week, Mercury's retrograde will be in Libra. At the end of next week, it moves back onto Virgo. Some say where it's supposed to be, but we have, a good week and a half of that Mercury retrograde in Libra, unfortunately. And pardon me, in opposition with Jupiter and the moon right at the beginning of the week. So I feel like the week is just going to start off with a bang for you, honestly. Libra's focus is on those that support you. Jupiter and the moon's focus is on those you love. Sometimes those two don't always line up, where you are very supportive of your family, but it doesn't seem like they're supportive of you when you feel you need the support. Two things come out of this. One, Mercury is retrograde, so we got to talk about communication, okay? One thing that I know about Libras, most of the Libras that I know, is they don't communicate about what they want. They get really quiet. Male or female, they all act like girls, to be honest with you. They get really quiet. When somebody asks what's wrong, they go nothing. It's kind of like they want you to read their mind to see that there's something up. And that's just not it's just not gonna work for you at all. Nobody's a mind reader. And when my Libra husband said, when I said, do you have to tell me I'm not a mind reader? He said, yes, you are. I said, okay, but I'm not going to read your mind. You got to use your big boy words and tell me what you want. So I feel like this really has a lot to do with it today, or this week, I should say. And I kind of feel this really around the people that are closest to you. So your closest family, your closest friends, you just need to talk and support, get some support, kind of a thing. Tell them you need the support. Don't make them try and read your mind. You're going to be disappointed every single time. The good news is that this retrograde Mercury isn't a trine with Mars, and Mars has a fantastic energy. First of all, second of all, it's very much focused on relationships, and this sort of helps you to kind of broaden out the support that you have. I mean, a lot of people. You formed relationships of all kinds with a lot of different people. You don't want to harp on what you're lacking in one relationship, because there's nothing good that comes out of that. If you broaden your vision to the amount of support that you do have, it changes the perception of the support that you have, if that makes sense. So instead of sitting there focused on one person who's not supporting you because they don't have time or they're not there or whatever the reason is, there's always a million reasons. If you broaden your horizons, you broaden your vision to see just how many people you do have that are super supportive of you, it feels much better because you have this huge support system. And because you have this huge support system, you get to basically pick and choose anybody that you want to support you within that support system. So that kind of helps a lot. Libras generally are very social beings, and being social beings, they know just about everybody. And so having that knowledge of knowing just about everybody gives you a lot more options than you may be thinking you have in the moment. When the moon moves out of that opposition, things get a little less emotional, I guess, if that makes sense, which is definitely helpful because it's never easy when it's emotional. So that is what I have for you, Teresa. I need a little bit of coffee before I move on. Moving on to Regina. Nothing going on in Scorpio this week in terms of planet activity. And being a fixed sign and other planets in fixed signs is really not a bad thing. I mean, granted, in a couple of months we'll be getting there for a good month or so, anyways, because looking at this week, next week is the beginning of Libra season. So we've got about 5 weeks before the sun moves into Scorpio, and that is going to cause some problems, unfortunately. So we'll just enjoy the time that we have where there is no influence right now. Focus is very much on the inner self, the inner emotional self. So that rules a lot of our deep emotional traumas, things like that. And that focus is going to stay here for another couple of weeks, unfortunately. What happens when focus is on the inner self like this is triggers. Number one, triggers. Triggers come up all the time. And while they're annoying and everybody goes, I hate triggers and I wish we didn't have them. Well, you wouldn't have them if you didn't have emotional trauma, period. And I'd, like you to introduce me to somebody who doesn't have emotional trauma, because I don't think that exists. I think every human being has emotional trauma on some level. Some have deeper levels than others. We'll just put it that way. Scorpios tend to hold things in pretty darn deep. And even though you're on the cusp of Libra, you're on the Scorpio side of that cusp. So there is a Libra influence, but it is more of there's more Scorpio to influence it than there is Libra. So that retrograde Mercury in Libra is also probably going to be a little bit of a pain in the rear also, because you're on that cusp of Libra there. And I feel like it's miscommunications or incorrect communications that are really going to be causing these triggers for you this week. Because these are the type of communications that may have happened before in the past and caused the trauma. And now the trigger comes up to trigger that trauma. And what happens when you've had trauma with a particular issue, like miscommunication, for example, or incorrect communication, is that it seems to be a pattern where you're always dealing with somebody making up something that doesn't need to be made up currently in the moment. So it isn't that this always happens to you, but because you already have an emotional root around that, it is going to feel like this always happens to you. So the trigger is actually happening for a reason. It's bringing that old trauma to the surface in order to give you the opportunity to be able to look at it for what it is, out as much as you can outside of the feelings that it provided. So if you're dealing with an individual who is giving out the wrong information about you now, it's going to trigger that instance and when it first happened. And that's going to be an emotional thing for you. It will be. But it will also give you the opportunity to say, do I want to continue to be emotional about this? Because the truth of the matter is that we do have a choice. Just because somebody else started this pattern, somebody else communicated the wrong information about you that one time, does not mean that you have to own up to that communication. They said something that was wrong. You don't have to accept that as being part of you. And quite frankly, anybody else's opinion based on that misinformation also doesn't have to affect you either. I understand that sometimes it does, and it really does feel like it does. But when you look at it, you still get to choose whether or not you're going to carry that with you for life. And it's that carrying it with you for life that really starts to hold you back. So it seems like a lot of gunk. It seems like a lot of, I don't really want to do this. But as you do it, you start to release that burden. And then the next time it starts to feel like you're not carrying such a heavy load of crap around with you. I like to look at emotional traumas, everything that's ruled by this particular focus. Emotional traumas is giant bags of garbage. If you have 10 full bags of garbage, you're carrying it with you wherever you go. That is really exhausting. That's a lot of weight to carry. And even if you're not physically carrying it, emotionally carrying it still drags you down just as much as physically carrying it. It just takes a little bit longer. So if you can let go of, at least empty half of one of those bags, that's going to be helpful for from here on out. So that is what I have for you, Regina. I'm going to move on to Teresa Shepherd. We continue to have Scorpio, nothing in Scorpio, which is awesome. We do continue to have Scorpio focused on the internal self, the emotional self, but also Scorpio is focused on self, period. So it's like a double whammy of focus on self, which can be a little bit tricky, a little bit uncomfortable. At the same time, though, there's a lot of celebration in that I find, and as you sort of work through emotional traumas and sort of let them go, it creates space for you to be able to change the way you do things. It creates space for you to eliminate patterns or create new, healthier patterns. I want to say that this week is, in terms of healthier patterns, what you eat is definitely a healthy pattern that you want to be focused on, because I feel like I know that you have a rather strict diet, but I feel like it's not necessarily so much that you're eating a bunch of stuff that you shouldn't be eating. I just don't feel that you're eating consistently or you're eating enough. So I want to say things like healthy snacks are something that you should always have on you as much as you possibly can. Just something that you can munch on in between meals and not skipping meals, especially breakfast. This is like a big deal. Okay. And I say it's a big deal because I've been through it. When you don't eat breakfast in the morning, it doesn't mess up your day. It messes up your whole system, honestly. And I did get to a point where I had to force myself to eat breakfast again, because my whole system was like, we don't eat this early, why are we doing this, kind of a thing. But it really screwed up my entire digestive system. So not skipping those meals like that, especially during the day, is something that you really want to focus on this week, because I feel like, because you're not eating consistently, it is sort of dragging you down energetically just a little bit there. The other thing that is sort of coming up for you this week is, I feel like in some cases, how do I want to say this? It's like you're sort of looking at yourself and all the responsibilities that are sort of piled up on top of you. And I feel like in some cases, some of those responsibilities aren't really yours. You've sort of given them to yourself, if that makes sense. And I feel like that it's possible that some of those things have to be taken off your list. One, you don't have enough time to deal with those things. Two, I feel like we'll talk about the responsibility of, I don't want to get too personal here on YouTube, but we had a conversation about your husband and what he was going through at the time. It's your responsibility, of course, to take care of your husband. But it's his responsibility to do the right thing. And you can't put that responsibility on yourself, even if he's not doing the right thing, if that makes sense. I hope it does. So you want to release that responsibility, because it's not yours. There's nothing you can do about it. And the truth of the matter is that you can make yourself crazy for nothing, because no matter how much you make yourself crazy, it's not going to change the outcome, or it's not going to change the way things are. So by taking that responsibility off your plate, it just frees you up to be able to put a responsibility in there that you are responsible for, or to put something in there that you absolutely do have control over and can work on without wasting your time focused on things that are out of your control, if that makes sense. So that is what I have for you, Teresa. I'm going to move on to my long list of Sagittarians. We're going to start with Amanda. Focus continues to be on the past, although there is an element of self in there as well. Focus on self. Two things actually come out of this for me. First of all, I kind of see you going through like a look back. Let's look back on Amanda and Amanda's career and Amanda's life, you know, kind of a thing. I'm sort of seeing it as a documentary, you know, taking a look back to see how far you've come, first of all, to see how much you've grown, to see how much your career has grown. Yes, there's always challenges in there. Maybe you created some new challenges. That's okay. It happens. It's what we do, right? But taking that time to kind of sort of look back and see how far you've come from where you started is important. One, you get to see the things that maybe still need to be worked on that you haven't really paid attention to yet, and that's okay. And you can put them on the list. But also, you really don't see how much you've grown if you don't look back to see where you came from. And I think that that's really important in the growth process. And I don't think that we spend enough time doing that, to be honest with you. I feel like not only do we need to, I mean, it's necessary. It's necessary in order for us to see how far we've come. It's also necessary to see what we still need to work on. It's necessary to see why we continue to accept certain things as being the way that they are, even if maybe we should change them. But there are certain things that it takes time to change. We're just not ready yet. I mean, we all gravitate toward the easier stuff and leave the hard stuff for later. We're only human, right? I also feel that this week is a really good time for you to celebrate that success, because celebration is definitely necessary. When I see you looking back, I see you literally like, hell yeah, because you've come a long way. And I know that you've come a long way. We've been working together for like ever now. So I know you've come a long way. You got to celebrate that. Do something fun with you and the girls, or do something fun just by yourself while the girls are at school. I'm kind of leaning towards by yourself, by the way. Just because no one is really going to understand this celebration quite as much as you will. You're the one doing all the work. They're not doing the work. And because they're not doing the work, they don't quite get it as much. And that's okay. They don't have to get it. This isn't about them getting it. This is about you. So take some time this week in your busy schedule to schedule something that's totally something that you need, whether it's a spa day, whether it's a mani-pedi, whether it's going to the lake by yourself and meditating. Doesn't matter what it is. Whatever Amanda feels pulled to do, that's what needs to happen. So that's what I have for you. And I'm going to move on to Sheri, my friend Sheri. Sagittarius continues to be focused on the past, but there is also an element of focus in self there, which we're going to be moving to that focus on self here pretty quick in the next couple of weeks. Two things actually sort of come up from that. I kind of feel like when we look to the past, we tend to get stuck there in all the fun that we had, all the freedom that we had at one time, more time with friends. I know you miss me. It's okay. I miss you too. You know, different things like that. And that's okay. But it's also a distraction. When you look to the past, you want to look for where you've been and how far you've come since you were there. And it really is all about growth. In every which way possible. It is really is all about growth. And that's the ultimate goal, is to grow physically as a child, personality wise, emotionally. I've known a lot of people who never grew emotionally. Um, and that's actually kind of sad when you think about it, because it's really difficult to watch a 50-year-old man walking around pointing the finger at everybody else for the problem because he can't take on personal responsibility. He never grew, you know, kind of a thing. So by doing that and by shifting your focus there, you can see how far you've come. You can see what still needs a little bit of work. We all still need a little bit of work. There's all kinds of different things that you can find by looking in the past. And I'm actually sort of told to tell you that this week would be a really good time to go through some of those numerous notebooks that you have laying around in your house, because those notebooks are really going to show you where you were when you wrote the story, or when you wrote in it. The old classes that you've been through, it's going to give you some reminders of what you learned at that time, reminders that you may need now. But that's a really good use of looking back onto the past in order to see what brought you to where you are now. And if it's negative, you know, in terms of, okay, in the past, you have more responsibility now because you lost your mom, and that totally blows. And I wish that never had happened. That is, of course, a situation that happened that brought you to where you are now. But if you wallow in the bad ones, you're also not paying attention to the good things that happened that helped you grow, both personality wise and spiritually at the same time. And that's really where we're at, is that sort of human evolution kind of a thing, both on a physical and a spiritual level. I've seen a lot of growth in you, to be honest with you. And I've seen in some cases where you're the same old Sheri you always have been. It's like there's two. There's two Sheris in there. But I don't think that's abnormal either. For most people, we all have sort of multiple personalities in a way. There's just the Sheri that gets everything done and can organize everything, and then there's the Sheri that's a little bit crazy, and you know, we're all a little bit afraid of her, to be honest with you. And that's okay. Both of those Sheris have a purpose, and you just need to make sure that both of those Sheris are living their purpose and not maybe fighting against each other, if that makes sense, because both personalities have a purpose in your life right now. And it's not to eliminate one because the other one is better. It's about how to find a way to get the two to work together so that you can actually get things done and get things moving. So that is what I have for you, my friend. Pardon me. Let me get some coffee. Mm-hmm. Mm. Okay, and I'm going to move on to Peg. Focus is still on the past, although we were moving into focus on self. And usually when we move from focus on the past to focus on self, we're really looking at sort of taking stock of where we've been in order to understand why we are where we are right now, or what brought us to this growth point in terms of where we are currently right now. And the first thing that comes to mind actually is your diet. You've lost a whole bunch of weight. I remember you telling me that you cut out sugar and all this other bad stuff that's not good for you. You're definitely in a much healthier place. I kind of feel like this week is going to be a little bit stressful, and there's going to be some triggers that come up around your diet changes. And so when you have stressful triggers, these are always the times that you fall back on old habits, whether they be eating cookies or ice cream in order to kind of relax yourself. We all have an addiction to something, and food is definitely on the top of that list. So I kind of feel like these sort of things are going to come up that might sort of try to come and trip you up, if that makes sense. And by focusing on why you started the journey in your health in terms of food is going to help you sort of get through that craving, if that makes sense. And in some cases, get through the stress. It will also give you maybe different ways of dealing with the stress that maybe you used before that were a little bit healthier than say going towards the sugar kind of a thing. So that's one thing that pops up for you around this. The other thing that I kind of feel is coming up around this too is I sort of get this old bullshit. So it's the only word that I can use. It's like old bullshit coming up. It's like a conversation that is annoying with somebody that comes up again. A good example of that for me in terms of what I do professionally is having that same conversation with somebody who's highly religious and what I'm doing is wrong. And it's like, dude, I wish we could be done with this conversation, but we're never going to be done with that conversation. It comes up all the time. I feel like this might be part of the stress trigger there, but I also want to say that there's a way of dealing with that, and there's a way of not dealing with that. And the way of dealing with that for me is to just be respectable. I mean, if you don't believe in what I do, you don't have to do it. I'm not going to force you to do it. I have nothing to prove. And I know that you are very much the same way. So is it annoying or is it haha funny? You get to make the choice between whether it's annoying or funny. For me personally, it's usually hilarious unless I'm already irritated, and then it's frustrating. And so it really also depends on what's going on around you. So if you're in a frustrated space to begin with and you have one of these old annoying conversations, that's only going to heighten your frustration. It's really important for you to maintain that, to manage your emotional reaction, as well as managing your energy as you go into it. And of course, the more frustrations that do pop up, because let's face it, Mercury's retrograde this week, and this is the first full week of Mercury being in retrograde, frustrations are going to come up. There's just no way around that. So the more you're able to manage how that works, how that comes through emotionally for you, the easier it is going to be for you. So that is what I have for you. And I am going to finish off here with Mama Sheri. Hi, Mama Sheri. I miss you like crazy. I really should just like call you tonight because we haven't talked in like forever. So I'm probably going to do that, or I might just move on to something else and completely forget. In fact, that's probably what's going to happen because I have like a million things on my plate. But hopefully you see this and know that I miss you like crazy, and I miss talking to you like crazy. And someday when I actually have time to sit down and talk on the phone, because let's face it, right now I don't, I am going to call you. Focus is on the past this week. We're moving into focus on self towards the end of the week. And so there's a couple of things I feel that pop up with you. I'm going to drink some coffee in the middle of your reading, so it feels like If you're drinking coffee while you're listening to it and I'm drinking coffee, it's like we're drinking it together. We're having our coffee together. You know, my dad's been coming up a lot lately, by the way. And I feel like that is something that you also may be going through a lot of. And in some cases, that feels like the past coming back to haunt you a little bit because it's like you're stuck there in that space. I'm not saying that you haven't dealt with what happened. I'm not saying that you haven't accepted it or anything like that. It was big, and I can't believe that next month is going to be 5 years since it happened, because it doesn't feel like 5 years at all. It feels like it just happened. And I feel like it's the same for you as well. And I have been sort of feeling your energy struggling back and forth between, I want to get moving and get going and get back into what I'm doing. And then it slumps back into, you know, what's the point of me trying, because blah, 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 you know, the whole stinking thinking craziness. You know all about that. In all honesty, and I'm going to be honest, it feels like before, when we were working together, when my dad was still here, before you got hurt, this is what we did. We put tons of energy into it. You know, you had your job and then you had your clients, and, you know, it's not that you never had time for yourself, because that's not true, but this was fun, and it doesn't feel fun anymore. And you're not the only one that doesn't feel, where it doesn't feel fun anymore. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It still does sometimes. But it's almost like him leaving took the fun out of it in some ways. And I feel like this week really is a time for you to try and get back to why you started this. Find the fun in this again, because you started before you met him. I started when he was in my life, but you started before you met him. And he wasn't a part of this, what we're doing now, when you started, which means to me that you have the opportunity to be able to look back on a time where you were doing this and you were enjoying it, and he wasn't there. And I feel like it might be best if you focus on that time before he came in order to kind of help you understand the emotions that you're going through around this now, if that makes sense. And I don't get on Facebook very often, and like I said, we haven't talked in like an eon, but I feel like what I have seen is, you know, when you post on Facebook about being busy with readings or whatever, it's sporadic. You know, you have a week where you're really busy, you have a week where there's nothing, you have a week where you're posting again a month later, and then it kind of drops down and dips down into nothing. In this business, that's just how it is. I mean, that's how it's always been for me too. And I think that because that's how it's happening, you want to be careful that you're not looking at it differently, because the emotional situation that you went through has changed how you look at it, if that makes sense. You want to go back to the way you looked at it before, not necessarily the way you look at it because of certain circumstances that did take place. I hope that makes sense, because it only half made sense coming out of my mouth. If it doesn't make sense, well, maybe call me and we'll see what we can do to make it make more sense, if that's even a possibility. So that's what I have for you. I love you and I miss you. I do miss you like crazy. And I would love to get a visit out there again It's just not going to happen this year, unfortunately. So, that's what I have for you. That's what I have for everybody. Thank you for hanging out. For the readings, being on the list for the readings. If you would like to be on this reading list, there is a link in the description below the video that will send you to become a site member. And then once you become a site member, you can join in the fun and be on the reading list. And of course, if you have any questions at all, you can always email me, and I will definitely walk you through it. I am Melissa Bruce, the Heavy Metal Psychic. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you guys next week. Make it a great week, because it is up to you to make it a great week. You guys have a good one.